My son texted, "Stop calling me. My wife says you're a burden. We don't need you anymore." When those words appeared on my phone screen, I felt my entire world collapse in a single heartbeat. 43 years of unconditional love reduced to a cold text message sent at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night. But what my son Derek didn't know was that I had been keeping meticulous records for the past 18 months. Records that would soon expose every lie, every manipulation, and every stolen dollar. This is the story of how a 72-year-old widow fought back against the ultimate betrayal. Good day, dear listeners. It's Isabella again. I'm glad you're here with me. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end, and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. Today's story comes from a woman whose strength and determination will inspire anyone who has ever felt discarded by those they trusted most. My name is Margaret Ellen Whitmore, and I live in a modest 3-bedroom colonial home in Naperville, Illinois. I've lived in this same house for 41 years, ever since my late husband Harold and I bought it 3 months before our first child was born. Harold was a structural engineer who worked for the city for 32 years before he retired. He passed away on November 12, 2019, from complications following a massive stroke. We were married for 47 years, 3 months, and 16 days. I counted every single one of them as a blessing. Before I retired, I worked as a registered nurse at Edward Hospital for 28 years. I specialized in geriatric care, which is perhaps ironic given what would eventually happen to me. I spent my entire career caring for elderly patients, advocating for their dignity, making sure they were never dismissed or ignored. I never imagined I would one day need someone to advocate for me against my own flesh and blood. Harold and I raised 2 children in this house. Our daughter Christine, now 45, lives in Portland, Oregon with her husband Michael and their twin daughters, Emma and Olivia, who are 16. Then there's Derek, my youngest, who just turned 42. Derek was always the sensitive one, the one who cried when he found injured birds in the backyard, the one who made me Mother's Day cards every year until he was 17. He married Jennifer Lawson in 2012, and they have one son, Tyler, who is now 11 years old. In the corner of my living room sits Harold's worn leather recliner. He used to spend every evening in that chair, reading engineering journals or watching documentaries about bridges and buildings. I've never moved it, never reupholstered it, despite the cracking leather on the armrests. Sometimes I still catch myself glancing at it, expecting to see him there with his reading glasses perched on his nose. On the mantel above the fireplace, there's a photograph from our 40th wedding anniversary. Harold in his best navy suit, and me in the periwinkle dress Christine helped me pick out. We were so happy that day. Neither of us knew he only had 2 more years left. After Harold died, Derek became my rock, or at least that's what I believed. He called me every Sunday without fail. He drove the 45 minutes from his home in Schaumburg to fix things around my house, to mow my lawn in summer, to shovel my driveway in winter. He sat with me on the first anniversary of Harold's death and let me cry into his shoulder for 3 hours straight. I thought I was the luckiest mother in the world to have raised such a devoted son. The first sign of change came so gradually that I almost didn't notice it. In March of 2021, Derek called me on a Wednesday evening, which was unusual. His voice sounded strained, almost embarrassed. "Mom, I hate to ask this, but Jennifer and I are in a tight spot. Tyler needs braces, and our dental insurance doesn't cover orthodontia. Could you possibly lend us $4,000? We'll pay you back within 6 months. I promise." Oh, what mother could say no to that? Tyler was my only grandson, a sweet boy with his father's dark eyes and his grandmother's stubborn streak. Of course I wanted him to have straight teeth, to feel confident when he smiled. I wrote Derek a check for $4,000 that very week. The 6 months came and went without any mention of repayment. I didn't bring it up because I didn't want to seem petty. Besides, Derek was still calling every Sunday, still coming over to help with yard work. The money seemed like a small price to pay for maintaining our close relationship. Then came September of 2021. Another phone call, this time from Jennifer herself. I remember being surprised because Jennifer rarely called me directly. She was always polite but distant, the kind of daughter-in-law who sent birthday cards but never wrote more than "Best wishes, Jennifer" inside them. "Margaret, I'm so sorry to bother you, but we're facing an unexpected expense. Derek's car needs a new transmission, and the repair estimate came in at $6,800. We don't have that kind of money right now, and Derek needs his car to get to work. Could you help us out, just until we get back on our feet?" I hesitated for a moment. That was a significant amount of money, but then I thought about Derek losing his job because he couldn't get to work, about Tyler suffering because his parents were under financial stress. I transferred $6,800 from my savings account to Derek's checking account the next morning. By December of 2021, I had given them an additional $5,000 for what Jennifer described as emergency home repairs. Their furnace had supposedly broken down in the middle of a cold snap. In February of 2022, it was $12,000 because Jennifer's mother needed surgery and they wanted to help with medical bills. In May of 2022, $15,000 for a business investment opportunity that Derek assured me would double their money within a year. Each time they promised to repay me. Each time I believed them. Each time I told myself that this was what family did. We helped each other. We sacrificed for each other. Harold and I had always lived modestly, saved diligently. What good was all the money sitting in my account if I couldn't use it to help my struggling son? I canceled the trip to Ireland I had been planning with my old nursing colleagues. I postponed the dental implant I needed to replace a cracked molar. I started buying store-brand groceries and cutting coupons for the first time in my life. I told myself these were temporary sacrifices, that Derek would get back on his feet soon, that everything I was giving up now would be worth it when my son's family was finally stable. But something else was changing too, something I tried desperately not to notice. Derek's Sunday phone calls became shorter. Then they became bi-weekly, then monthly. When he did call, he seemed distracted, always rushing to get off the phone. He stopped coming over to help with the house. I hired a neighbor's teenage son to mow my lawn because Derek kept saying he was too busy every time I asked. In August of 2022, I wasn't invited to Tyler's 10th birthday party. I learned about it 3 days later when I saw photographs on Jennifer's Facebook page. There was my grandson, surrounded by friends and family, blowing out candles on an elaborate superhero cake. Jennifer's parents were there. Jennifer's sister and her children were there. Even some of Jennifer's co-workers were there. But I was nowhere to be seen because nobody had told me the party was happening. When I called Derek to ask about it, he sounded irritated rather than apologetic. "Mom, it was just a small thing. Jennifer didn't want to overwhelm Tyler with too many people. You know how kids are." 53 people. I counted them in the photographs. 53 people at a party I wasn't invited to, for a grandson I had helped support for years. But I swallowed my hurt, because that's what mothers do. I made excuses for my son because the alternative was too painful to consider. The requests for money continued. September 2022 brought a demand for $8,000 because Tyler needed tutoring for his learning difficulties. November 2022 required $11,000 for unexpected property taxes. January 2023 saw me writing a check for $14,000 because Jennifer had supposedly been laid off and they needed help covering their mortgage. I say supposedly now because I would later learn that Jennifer never lost her job. She had actually received a promotion and a 12% raise that same month. By March of 2023, I had given Derek and Jennifer a total of $93,400, nearly half of my life savings accumulated over decades of careful financial planning. and I had received nothing in return except increasingly cold treatment and growing distance from the grandson I adored. The moment everything changed came on Tuesday, April 18th, 2023, at exactly 8:23 in the evening. I had been trying to reach Derek for 3 weeks. He hadn't returned any of my calls or responded to any of my text messages. I was worried. Despite everything, despite all the warning signs I had been ignoring, I was still worried about my son. I thought maybe something terrible had happened. Maybe he was sick. Maybe Jennifer was sick. Maybe Tyler was in trouble. So I called one more time. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. I left a message, my voice probably sounding pathetically desperate. Derek, honey, it's Mom. I'm getting worried about you. Please call me back. I just want to know that you're okay. I love you. 11 minutes later, my phone buzzed with an incoming text message. I picked it up, expecting something reassuring, something that would explain the silence and put my maternal fears to rest. Instead, I read these words, "Stop calling me. My wife says you're a burden. We don't need you anymore. Don't contact us again." I stared at that message for what felt like hours. The phone slipped from my fingers and landed on the kitchen floor. I was standing at the counter in the middle of making myself a cup of chamomile tea when my son essentially told me I was dead to him. The kettle began to whistle, but I didn't move to turn it off. I couldn't move at all. Something cold settled in my chest, not sadness, not yet. Something sharper, clearer. It was as if a fog I hadn't even realized was clouding my vision had suddenly lifted, and I could finally see the truth that had been in front of me all along. My son had used me. He had manipulated me. He had taken nearly $100,000 from me while systematically cutting me out of his life. And now that he had gotten everything he thought he could get, he was discarding me like a piece of trash. I picked up my phone from the floor. The screen was cracked, but the message was still visible, those cruel words still glowing in the dim light of my kitchen. I took a screenshot. Then I took a deep breath. Then I began to fight back. The next morning, I started compiling evidence. I'm a meticulous person by nature, a trait that served me well during my nursing career and would serve me even better now. I pulled out every bank statement from the past 3 years. I gathered every check I had written to Derek, every record of every electronic transfer. I printed out every text message exchange, every email, every piece of communication that documented the lies I had been told. I spread all the documents across my dining table, arranging them chronologically. The paper covered nearly the entire surface, a damning paper trail of deception and exploitation. When I added up all the amounts, the final total made me physically ill. $93,400, plus the $412 in bank fees I had incurred from the transfers, plus the approximately $14,000 I had spent on gifts for Tyler, Derek, and Jennifer over the same period. The total came to $107,812. I had given my son more than $100,000, and in return, he had called me a burden. On Thursday, April 20th, I made an appointment with attorney Barbara Hendricks of Hendricks and Associates in downtown Chicago. Barbara was recommended to me by my old friend Shirley Patterson, who had used her services during a complicated estate dispute several years earlier. Shirley described Barbara as a shark in pearls, and that turned out to be completely accurate. Barbara was a striking woman in her early 60s, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and blue eyes that missed nothing. When I finished telling her my story, those eyes were filled with cold fury on my behalf. "Mrs. Whitmore, what your son and daughter-in-law have done to you is called elder financial abuse. It's not just morally reprehensible, it's illegal. And based on the documentation you've brought me, I believe we have an extremely strong case." She explained that, under Illinois law, financial exploitation of an elderly person was a serious offense that could result in both civil and criminal penalties. She also explained that the evidence I had gathered, the bank records, the text messages, the pattern of isolation and manipulation, painted a clear picture of deliberate exploitation. But I should warn you, Barbara said, leaning forward across her mahogany desk. If we pursue this, it will likely destroy whatever relationship you have left with your son. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the message on my phone. Stop calling me. My wife says you're a burden. We don't need you anymore. My son already destroyed our relationship, I said quietly. I'm just making sure there are consequences for what he did. Barbara smiled, and it was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just spotted prey. Then let's get to work. Over the next several weeks, Barbara and her team built our case with surgical precision. She brought in a forensic accountant named Gregory Walsh to analyze Derek and Jennifer's financial records, which we obtained through legal discovery processes. What Gregory found made my stomach turn. During the same period when Derek was claiming poverty and begging me for money, he and Jennifer had purchased a vacation condo in Clearwater, Florida for $265,000. They had bought a brand new BMW X5 for Jennifer, paid in full for $74,000. They had taken 4 luxury vacations, including a 2-week trip to the Maldives that cost over $18,000. They had opened investment accounts totaling more than $150,000. My son had never been struggling financially. He had been living a life of luxury, funded in large part by the money he had stolen from his widowed mother through lies and manipulation. Gregory also discovered something even more troubling. Derek had applied for power of attorney over my finances in February of 2023, 2 months before he sent me that cruel text message. The application had been denied because I had never signed the necessary documents, but the intent was clear. My son had been planning to gain complete control over my money. When that failed, he had decided to cut me off entirely. On May 3, 2023, Barbara hired a private investigator named Detective Patricia Rodriguez to conduct additional research into Derek and Jennifer's activities. Detective Rodriguez was a former Chicago PD detective with 22 years of experience. She was thorough, professional, and utterly relentless. Within 2 weeks, Detective Rodriguez had uncovered evidence that Derek had been telling Jennifer's family that I was suffering from dementia and couldn't be trusted to manage my own affairs. He had told his employer that his mother had died to garner sympathy and get extra time off work. He had even told Tyler that Grandma Margaret was confused and sick, and that they couldn't visit me anymore because it would upset me. My son had not only stolen my money, he had stolen my reputation, my dignity, and my relationship with my grandson, all so he could continue extracting resources from me without interference. The first confrontation came on May 17, 2023. Derek apparently received notification that a civil lawsuit had been filed against him, and he appeared at my door at 6:45 that evening, unannounced and uninvited. I was in my garden, tending to Harold's rose bushes, when I heard a car door slam in the driveway. I looked up to see Derek striding toward me, his face twisted with rage. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he shouted before he even reached the garden gate. "You're suing me? Your own son? Have you completely lost your mind?" I stood up slowly, brushing dirt from my gardening gloves. My heart was pounding, but I kept my voice calm. "I'm holding you accountable for stealing over $100,000 from me. That's what I'm doing." "I didn't steal anything. You gave us that money. You wanted to help us." "I gave you that money because you lied to me, Derek. You told me you were struggling. You told me Tyler needed braces and your car needed repairs and Jennifer lost her job. None of it was true." His face went pale. He hadn't expected me to know about the lies. He had underestimated his mother. "Mom, look, let's just calm down and talk about this. There's been a misunderstanding. Jennifer, she exaggerates sometimes. You know how she is. But we never meant to hurt you. You called me a burden. You told me never to contact you again. You told my grandson that I have dementia. Derek's mouth opened and closed. He looked like a fish gasping for air. I can explain that. It wasn't what it sounded like. Jennifer was upset that night, and she made me send that text. You know how she is. But I never stopped loving you, Mom. You're my mother. Then why did you apply for power of attorney over my finances without my knowledge? Were you planning to love me all the way to the bank? That stopped him cold. His face went from pale to ashen gray. How do you know about that? I have an excellent attorney, Derek, and she has an excellent forensic accountant and an excellent private investigator. I know everything. Every lie you told, every vacation you took with my money, every investment you made while telling me you couldn't afford groceries. Derek's expression transformed. The mask of concerned son fell away entirely, replaced by something cold and calculating. You're making a huge mistake. Do you really want to drag this through court? Think about what people will say. Think about Tyler. Is this the legacy you want to leave? My legacy will be showing my grandson that actions have consequences, even for family. Derek stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the expensive cologne he wore. Cologne I had probably paid for. If you go through with this, you will never see Tyler again. I'll make sure of it. I'll tell everyone you're senile, that you're a bitter old woman who can't accept that her children grew up and don't need her anymore. I will destroy you. I met his eyes without flinching. You can try. I walked past him toward my back door. My hands were shaking, but I refused to let him see my fear. This isn't over, Mom, Derek called after me. You're going to regret this. Perhaps, I said without turning around, but not as much as you will. I went inside and locked the door. Then I called attorney Barbara Hendricks and told her about Derek's threats. She advised me to document everything and to consider installing security cameras around my property. I did both immediately. Over the next several months, Derek and Jennifer launched a coordinated campaign to destroy my reputation and turn family against me. Jennifer called my sister Dorothy in Tucson and told her that I was showing signs of severe cognitive decline, that I had accused Derek of terrible things that he never did, that I was paranoid and possibly dangerous. Dorothy called me immediately after, confused and worried. Maggie, Jennifer says you're not well. She says you've been making wild accusations and threatening them. What's going on? I spent an hour on the phone with my sister explaining everything. I emailed her copies of the bank records, the text messages, the evidence Barbara had compiled. By the end of the conversation, Dorothy was crying. That little weasel, she said, using the childhood nickname she'd given Derek when he was small. I always knew Jennifer was trouble, but I never thought Derek would turn out like this. Harold must be rolling in his grave. Dorothy became one of my fiercest allies. She called other family members and told them the truth before Derek and Jennifer could poison them with lies. She flew in from Tucson to attend the first hearing in my case. She sat in the front row of the courtroom and stared at Derek with such disappointment that he couldn't meet her eyes. Christine, my daughter, was slower to come around. She lived across the country and had always tried to stay neutral in family disputes. When I first told her what was happening, she seemed skeptical. Mom, are you sure you're not overreacting? Derek can be irresponsible, but I can't imagine him deliberately trying to hurt you. Christine, I have documentation, thousands of pages of documentation. I'm not making this up. I'm not saying you are, but maybe there's been some miscommunication. Maybe if you just sat down and talked to Derek, you could work this out without lawyers. That conversation left me feeling more alone than I had since Harold died. My daughter didn't believe me. My son had betrayed me. I was a 72-year-old woman fighting a battle I never wanted, against people who were supposed to love me. But I wasn't as alone as I felt. My neighbors had noticed the changes in my situation, and several of them reached out with support. Virginia Chen, who lived 3 houses down, started bringing me homemade dumplings every Sunday. For strength, she said, pressing the warm containers into my hands. Frank Morrison, the retired firefighter across the street, began keeping an eye on my house, and reported immediately when Derek and Jennifer showed up uninvited on June 8th, demanding to talk. I didn't answer the door that day. I watched through the window as Derek pounded on the door and shouted, his face red with fury. Jennifer stood behind him, arms crossed, looking around the neighborhood with obvious embarrassment. When Frank walked over and asked if there was a problem, Derek shouted at him too, "Mind your own business, old man. This is a family matter." Frank didn't flinch. "Mrs. Whitmore is my neighbor, and I'm making it my business. You need to leave now, or I'm calling the police." They left, but not before Derek turned and looked directly at my window, directly at me. His expression sent chills down my spine. There was no love in those eyes, only hatred. The trial began on Monday, October 16th, 2023, at the Cook County Circuit Court in downtown Chicago. The courtroom was presided over by the Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison, a stern-faced woman in her late 50s with a reputation for having zero tolerance for elder abuse cases. Barbara had prepared me extensively for what to expect. She had rehearsed my testimony with me, helped me organize my thoughts, taught me how to remain calm under cross-examination. But nothing could fully prepare me for the experience of sitting in a witness stand and describing how my own son had systematically exploited and discarded me. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, with pale wood paneling and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. Derek sat at the defendant's table with his attorney, a slick-looking man named Marcus Webb, who had been recommended to him by one of his wealthy friends. Jennifer sat in the gallery behind him, wearing a modest dress I had never seen before, probably chosen to make her look more sympathetic. I sat in the witness stand for nearly 3 hours on the first day. Barbara guided me through my testimony with gentle precision, asking questions that allowed me to tell my story in my own words. I described every phone call, every request for money, every lie I had been told. I presented check after check, transfer after transfer, totaling $107,812. When I described the text message Derek had sent me, my voice faltered. I could see the words so clearly in my mind. "Stop calling me. My wife says you're a burden. We don't need you anymore." "Take your time, Mrs. Whitmore," Judge Morrison said, her voice unexpectedly kind. "There's no rush." I took a deep breath and continued. I described finding out about the vacation condo, the BMW, the Maldives trip. I described learning that my grandson had been told I was sick and confused. I described the power of attorney application, the campaign to destroy my reputation, the threats Derek had made when he came to my house. By the time I finished, several members of the jury were crying. One older woman in the back row was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, looking at Derek with undisguised disgust. Then it was Derek's turn to testify. His attorney had coached him to appear remorseful and sympathetic, but the cross-examination by Barbara Hendricks destroyed any goodwill he might have built. "Mr. Whitmore, you testified that the money your mother gave you was a gift, not a loan. Is that correct?" "Yes, that's correct. She wanted to help us." "I see. And when you told your mother that your son Tyler needed $4,000 for braces, was that true?" Derek hesitated. "Yes, Tyler did need braces." Barbara picked up a document from her table. "I have here dental records obtained from your son's orthodontist. According to these records, Tyler Whitmore received braces in July of 2019, 2 full years before you asked your mother for money to pay for them. The braces were fully covered by your dental insurance. Can you explain this discrepancy?" Derek's face went red. There might have been some additional work that wasn't covered." "Additional work totaling $4,000? That's interesting, because according to the orthodontist's billing records, the total out-of-pocket cost for Tyler's orthodontic treatment was $312. Would you like to see the records?" "I don't remember all the details. It was years ago." Barbara nodded as if this was exactly what she expected. Let's talk about the $6,800 your mother gave you for car repairs. You told her your car needed a new transmission, but according to records from your auto repair shop, the only work done on your vehicle that month was an oil change costing $47. Where did the remaining $6,753 go? There were other expenses. I don't remember exactly. You don't remember? I see. Barbara's voice dripped with contempt. Let me help refresh your memory. Bank records show that 3 days after receiving that $6,800 from your mother, you made a down payment of $6,000 on a vacation condo in Clearwater, Florida. Is that a coincidence? Derek's attorney objected, claiming the question was argumentative. Judge Morrison overruled him. Answer the question, Mr. Whitmore. It was. There were different accounts. The timing was coincidental. Coincidental, Barbara repeated. Just like it was coincidental that every time you asked your mother for emergency money, you subsequently made large purchases or investments. The BMW purchase came 3 weeks after the furnace money. The Maldives trip was booked 2 days after you received funds for your supposed property tax emergency. The pattern is remarkably consistent for someone who was supposedly struggling financially. By the end of the cross-examination, Derek was sweating visibly. His carefully constructed facade had crumbled entirely. Even Jennifer, watching from the gallery, had lost her composed expression and was chewing her fingernails like a nervous child. The forensic accountant, Gregory Walsh, testified next. He presented charts and graphs showing the correlation between money leaving my accounts and luxury purchases appearing in Derek and Jennifer's financial records. He explained in clear, accessible terms how Derek had systematically drained his mother's savings while living a lifestyle far beyond his legitimate means. In my professional opinion, Gregory concluded, this was not a case of family members accepting generous gifts. This was deliberate financial exploitation, carefully planned and executed over an extended period. The defendant created false emergencies to trigger his mother's natural desire to help, then diverted those funds to personal luxury spending while maintaining the fiction of financial hardship. Detective Patricia Rodriguez testified about her investigation into Derek's campaign to damage my reputation. She presented evidence of the lies he had told about my mental state, the attempts to gain power of attorney without my consent, and the threatening behavior he had displayed after being sued. Mr. Whitmore told his employer that his mother had passed away, Detective Rodriguez testified. He used this fabrication to obtain bereavement leave, which he then used to take a vacation in Cancun with his wife. He told his son that his grandmother was too sick to visit, effectively ending their relationship. And he told multiple family members that Mrs. Whitmore was suffering from dementia, despite having no medical evidence to support this claim, and despite knowing it to be false. The trial lasted 8 days. 8 days of testimony, evidence, cross-examination, and legal arguments. 8 days during which the full extent of my son's betrayal was laid bare for all to see. On the 9th day, Judge Morrison delivered her verdict. This court finds the defendant, Derek Allen Whitmore, liable for financial exploitation of an elderly person under Illinois law. The evidence presented has demonstrated a clear and deliberate pattern of manipulation, deception, and abuse of familial trust. The defendant systematically extracted money from his mother through false pretenses, then attempted to isolate her from family support and damage her reputation when she sought to hold him accountable. Judge Morrison's voice was cold and measured, but her eyes were filled with something that looked like disgust as she looked at Derek. The court orders the defendant to make full restitution to the plaintiff in the amount of $107,812 plus interest calculated from the date of each fraudulent transfer. Additionally, the court awards punitive damages in the amount of $75,000, reflecting the egregious nature of the defendant's conduct and the need to deter similar behavior. The defendant is also ordered to pay all legal fees incurred by the plaintiff in pursuing this action, totaling approximately $43,000. Derek's face had gone completely white. His attorney was whispering urgently in his ear, but Derek wasn't listening. He was staring at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before. It was the expression of a man who had just realized he had lost everything. Furthermore, Judge Morrison continued, the court is referring this matter to the state's attorney's office for potential criminal prosecution. The evidence presented suggests violations of multiple Illinois statutes regarding financial exploitation of elderly persons, fraud, and theft. The defendant should expect to be contacted by law enforcement in the near future. Jennifer let out a small cry from the gallery. Derek turned to look at her, and for a moment, something passed between them. Blame, perhaps. Recrimination. The first cracks in an alliance that had been built on greed and cruelty. I sat in my chair at the plaintiff's table, my hands folded in my lap, and felt absolutely nothing. Not triumph, not vindication, just a profound, exhausted emptiness where my love for my son used to be. The consequences for Derek and Jennifer were swift and severe. The criminal investigation Judge Morrison had referred moved quickly. By December of 2023, Derek had been charged with financial exploitation of an elderly person, a Class 2 felony in Illinois, carrying a potential sentence of 3 to 7 years in prison. Jennifer was named as a co-conspirator, though she eventually accepted a plea deal that allowed her to avoid jail time in exchange for testifying against her husband. Derek's employer learned about the bereavement leave fraud. He was terminated immediately, with a notation in his permanent file that would make it nearly impossible for him to find similar work. His professional reputation was destroyed. To satisfy the court's judgment, Derek and Jennifer were forced to sell their primary residence, the vacation condo in Florida, the BMW, and most of their investments. Even after liquidating nearly everything they owned, they still came up short. Derek was placed on a payment plan for the remaining balance, with automatic garnishment of any future wages he might earn. Jennifer filed for divorce on January 15, 2024. Her attorney cited irreconcilable differences, but the real reason was obvious. Jennifer's parents had given her an ultimatum: leave Derek or be cut off from their considerable family wealth. She chose money over marriage without a moment's hesitation. I suppose I shouldn't have been surprised. She had married Derek for money in the first place. Tyler was caught in the middle of the divorce, a bewildered 11-year-old boy who couldn't understand why his world was falling apart. Jennifer obtained primary custody, and I was informed by my attorney that she had told Tyler I was partly responsible for the family's troubles. But something unexpected happened. On February 3rd, 2024, I received a letter in the mail. It was written in careful, childish handwriting on lined notebook paper. Dear Grandma Margaret, I know we're not supposed to talk, but I wanted to say I'm sorry. Dad told me you were sick, but Tommy Pearson's mom said that wasn't true and that Dad did something really bad to you. I don't understand everything, but I miss you. I miss the cookies you used to make and the stories you told about Grandpa Harold. I hope you're okay. Love, Tyler. P.S. Please don't tell Mom I wrote this. I sat at my kitchen table and cried for an hour after reading that letter. Then I called attorney Barbara Hendricks and asked if there was any way I could pursue grandparent visitation rights. It's complicated, Barbara said. Jennifer has primary custody, and she's not exactly inclined to cooperate. But given the circumstances, and given that the alienation was based on lies Derek told, I think we have a reasonable argument to present to a family court. It would mean more legal proceedings, though. Are you sure you're up for that? I'm 72 years old, I said. I've already fought one battle I never expected to fight. What's one more? The grandparent visitation case was less contentious than I feared. Jennifer's attorney advised her that fighting it would look bad given the circumstances, and that a judge would likely rule in my favor anyway. In March of 2024, I was granted supervised visitation with Tyler every other Saturday. The first visit was awkward. Tyler was nervous and uncertain, clearly confused about how to feel about a grandmother he had been taught to fear. But by the second visit, some of the tension had melted away. By the third visit, he was asking me to tell him stories about his grandfather, about the bridges Harold had worked on, and the buildings he had helped design. "Grandpa sounds really cool," Tyler said, looking at a photograph I had brought of Harold at work. "Dad never talks about him." "Your grandfather was a wonderful man," I said, "and he loved you very much. He would have been so proud of you." Tyler's eyes filled with tears. "I wish I remembered him better." "That's what I'm here for," I said, putting my arm around his thin shoulders, "to help you remember." Derek, meanwhile, sank further into disgrace. Unable to find professional employment due to his damaged reputation, he took a series of low-wage jobs. His expensive taste had left him without any financial safety net, and the court-ordered garnishment of his wages meant he could barely afford rent on a small studio apartment in a rough neighborhood on the outskirts of Chicago. I saw him once, about 6 months after the trial. I was grocery shopping at the Jewel Osco near my house when I turned a corner and nearly ran my cart into his. He looked terrible. He had lost weight, and not in a healthy way. His clothes were wrinkled and slightly dirty. His eyes had a hollow, haunted look. He froze when he saw me, his hand tightening on the handle of his basket, which contained only a few cans of generic soup and a loaf of discount bread. We stared at each other for a long moment. I waited for the flood of emotion I expected, the anger or the grief or even the satisfaction of seeing him brought so low. But I felt nothing. Just a quiet, distant sorrow for the man he could have been, for the relationship we could have had, for all the years lost to his greed and deceit. "Mom," he said finally. His voice was hoarse. I'm sorry for everything. I know it doesn't mean anything now, but I am. I was wrong. I was so wrong." I looked at him, at this stranger who wore my son's face. "Yes," I said, "you were." Then I pushed my cart past him and continued my shopping. I did not look back. The money I recovered, minus legal fees and court costs, came to approximately $140,000 when all was said and done. It was more than I had originally given Derek because of the punitive damages and interest. I could have used it to restore my savings, to rebuild the financial cushion that had taken me decades to accumulate. Instead, I made different choices. I donated $25,000 to the Illinois Department on Aging's Elder Abuse Prevention Program. I wanted to help other seniors who might be facing what I had faced, who might not have the resources or the knowledge to fight back the way I had. I set up an education trust fund for Tyler, with enough money to cover 4 years of college when he was old enough. The terms of the trust specified that Derek could never access the money for any reason. I didn't want my grandson to suffer for his father's sins. I finally took that trip to Ireland, the one I had canceled years earlier. I went with my old nursing colleagues, 6 women in our 70s, who spent 2 weeks touring castles and pubs and kissing the Blarney Stone. I laughed more on that trip than I had in years. I renovated Harold's workshop in the basement, turning it into a craft room where I could pursue the quilting hobby I had always wanted to try. I made a quilt for Tyler, incorporating fabric from some of Harold's old shirts, so he would have something to remember his grandfather by. I became an advocate. I joined a support group for survivors of elder financial abuse and eventually began leading sessions myself. I spoke at community centers and senior centers about the warning signs of exploitation, about how to protect yourself, about how to fight back if you've been victimized. "You are not alone," I would tell them, looking out at rooms full of elderly faces. "And you are not helpless. It doesn't matter how old you are or who did this to you. You have the right to seek justice. You have the power to reclaim your dignity." I meant every word. My relationship with Christine eventually healed. After seeing the evidence presented at trial, after watching her brother's lies unravel in public, she could no longer deny the truth. She flew in from Portland to spend Christmas with me in 2024, bringing Emma and Olivia, who were delightful teenagers full of energy and laughter. "I'm so sorry I doubted you, Mom," Christine said on Christmas Eve as we sat together watching the snow fall outside my living room window. "I should have believed you from the start." "You believed what you wanted to believe," I said, "that your brother was a good person who would never hurt his mother." "I wanted to believe that too, for a very long time." "How do you do it?" she asked. "How do you not hate him?" I thought about the question for a long time before answering. "Hate takes energy," I said finally. "Energy I would rather spend on things that bring me joy, on my garden, my quilts, my friends, my grandchildren, on living well and helping others. Derek made his choices, and he's living with the consequences. I don't need to carry him around with me anymore." Christine squeezed my hand. "You're stronger than I ever realized." I'm a 73-year-old woman who worked as a nurse for nearly 30 years and was married to the love of her life for almost 5 decades. I've seen things you can't imagine. I've survived losses that would break a lesser person. A greedy son and his manipulative wife. They were just another challenge to overcome. I smiled at my daughter, feeling a peace I hadn't felt in years, and I overcame them. Today, I am 74 years old. I live in the same house Harold and I bought together, surrounded by his roses and his memories and the life we built. I see Tyler every other Saturday, and our relationship grows stronger with each visit. I have friends who bring me dumplings and neighbors who watch my house, and a sister who calls every Sunday just to check in. Derek is on probation after accepting a plea deal in his criminal case. He will be paying me restitution for the next 15 years. I don't think about him much anymore. He is a chapter of my life that has ended, a wound that has healed into a scar I barely notice most days. What happened to me was painful beyond words. My own son, the child I carried and birthed and raised with all the love in my heart, chose to betray me in the most fundamental way possible. He stole my money, my trust, my peace of mind. He tried to steal my dignity and my relationships and my very sanity. But he failed. Not because I am special or extraordinary, but because I refused to give up. I documented everything. I sought help. I surrounded myself with allies. I fought back with every tool available to me, and in the end, I won. If you are listening to this story and recognizing parts of your own life, I want you to know something important. It is never too late to fight back. It doesn't matter how old you are or how powerful your abusers seem. You have rights. You have options. You have strength you may not even know you possess. Family is supposed to protect you, not exploit you. Blood is supposed to be thicker than water, not thicker than basic human decency. If the people who claim to love you are hurting you, you do not have to accept it. You do not have to be silent. You do not have to be a victim. Stand up, speak out, fight back. I did, and it saved my life. So I ask you, if family betrayed you, would you fight back? What would you do? Share your thoughts below and subscribe for more stories. Your comments and support mean the world to me and to all the survivors who might be listening, wondering if they too can find the strength to reclaim their lives. Thank you for listening.